3, 2, 1. I can't use fingers anymore. Alright, 3, 2, 1, go. Hello and welcome back to DevsTalk, the real panel that we were waiting for this last month. Today we won't have any sponsors or any other chit-chats before the stream, but instead we're gonna jump straight off to business, and with me for this is Tilset and Filippo Vicarelli. How's it going, guys?
Good.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Would you like to tell the people watching the stream a little bit about yourself? Like, what do you do, what games you've composed for, made sounds for, a little bit about what you've done so far before this moment? Any takers, or do I appoint someone? Or
I will start.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, I am Filippo Vicarelli. I am a freelance music composer based in Italy. I've been doing a lot of music composition, sound design for indie games, and I worked for the popular mobile game Hill Climb Racing 2. And I also founded a music licensing website called playonloop.com. I founded it in 2010 and still running. And that's it.
All right. What about you?
Nice. My name is Tilset, and I am a sound and music designer based in Oslo, Norway. I'm working on, I think, 5 or 6 indie games right now, mostly doing sound design, but on some of them I'm also making the music. And I've recently, especially the last couple of months, been very interested in working with AI for music composing and using that as a co-composer. So I think that's kind of starting to become my niche in some kind of way.
Out of curiosity, how does that AI and composing work?
Well, there are a lot of different softwares available that have AIs that can generate music. So you can choose what style of music you want and tempo and intensity and stuff like that. And then it generates music. And sometimes it doesn't really sound that good, but you can always just export the MIDI and you can put that into your DAW and keep working on it. So I found it to be a very quick way to get some pretty decent or even good ideas out there, and then you can speed up your workflow, basically. Okay. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Filippo, have you ever heard about something like that, or tried something like that?
Actually, I think I tried some iPhone apps that could start from you singing a melody, and then the app was trying to create a music track.
Oh yeah, a few years ago those were super popular. They were pretty awful, but it was fun.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's getting better too, so it's fun to work with. There's one game that I'm working on right now. We are pretty early development, but I'm only going to use that for all the music, and it's pretty exciting.
Is it for the game that was on your Twitter feed pretty recently about the whole take off arm, throw it away?
Oh no, that's Helheim Hassle. That's being developed in Hamar, but this one with the AI is it's more of a passion project that I'm doing with some friends from Spain and the UK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Cool.
I sort of want to jump into the whole panel part about this, but I like this way of discussion we have. So I'm just gonna throw out a question and see what you guys react to it. I had this question earlier on, and I think it fits this whole part of AI and stuff like that. How do you decide on which particular instrument to use in a project or soundtrack? Like, for instance, and especially continuing from that, what makes said instrument suitable for an audio asset? I'm thinking both composing and sound design wise. But yeah.
Well, it depends a lot on what type of game it is and what the vibe and mood of the game in general is, I think. Because I usually choose a palette for the whole game first, and then make the tracks with those elements to make it like everything be tied together and stuff like that. But also depending on if there are different characters, maybe they have a certain instrument like tied to them. It depends, I guess.
Yeah, totally. I agree. It can be very easy when the game has a really specific setting. For example, for Hill Climb Racing, I just embraced the hilly-billy redneck style of the main character, as well as the game levels, which are mostly based on location, as countryside, canyons, forests, and so on.
Yeah.
So deciding to use mainly acoustic instruments, guitars, blues, and country music. It's pretty straightforward. It has to reflect the style of the game.
Yeah. I think it's more difficult when the game is more abstract.
Yeah.
Do you have an example of a game where this could be an issue or harder to figure out? Can you think of any off the top of your head?
It's always difficult.
Yeah, I know that one was ad hoc question. I was just thinking another one I came to think of in regard of that whole discussion. Do you both of you know Don't Starve?
Yeah.
I think I never played it.
It's basically a 2D survival game. Later on, they added a co-op version of it, Don't Starve Together. But what they have made is that every time somebody speaks, it's an instrument. It's like a trumpet or a violin or something like that. And I was just thinking if you guys have had any similar situation in any of the games you've done music for or sounds for, and how did you end up with that sort of like okay, I'm just gonna do this random noise thing, and that's gonna be the voice of the main character or something like that.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
It never happened for me, but usually I work a lot with retro games that where you are forced to use primal waveforms. So you basically have to come out with realistic sounds using only synthesizers. So in a certain way, I tried to do something like that. I mean, come up with something that could resemble a real sound, but with some added creativity to give it some sense.
Yeah. I'm one of the games that I'm working on right now. They wanted like that the character you can like. One of the mechanics is signaling to your parent that you want something or want to do something, and it's going to convey a lot of different emotions, but they didn't want it to be actual words. So they wanted something that's kind of similar to what you do in Journey, but more expressive, and also not that like synthesized, but sounding more like a whale kind of. And that's kind of interesting to work with too.
Okay. I'm just trying to imagine how that actually sounds, but
yeah, I try to do everything with my own voice and just like throw a lot of plugins on them.
nothing wrong with using your own voice.
No, I tried using my trumpet, but it sounded too metallic. So I think my voice is gonna be the source.
I remember one project I was working on back in the day as a sound designer. The only project I've been doing that as, and actually, still in the released version, one of the enemies, their whole sound palette or whole sound escape of what they put out is my voice just edited.
It's fun.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I just had a good time going into the audio booth and just make random screeches and sounds and yells.
I enjoy that way too much. There are these sheep in the background in Helheim that you just see them for maybe a total of 20 seconds in the entire game. But I wanted them to sound really stupid, and I think I ended up saying "ba" in 100 different ways, and I chose 50 that I thought were cool, and then I ended up having to choose only 5 because they were so they didn't really take up much space at all, but it was way too much fun just in front of the microphone.
I feel you on that.
Yeah.
On the topic of actually sounds and editing and all this stuff, both of you, what are your favorite tricks when you do edit a sound? You want to start with this, Ora, since you were already talking about it a little bit?
Yeah. Well, it depends on what I'm making, because if it's more Foley based, then obviously you want it to not add too much effects. But I think one of the most fun things that I like to play with is adding reverb and then frequency shifting that up or down and stuff like that. Just putting plugins basically in the wrong order or using them for a purpose they're not specifically made for.
Mm-hmm. So basically you try to break things up and see what you end up with.
Yeah, I guess.
Well.
Oh, that's great. I think I don't have original tricks to share, but for example, I work a lot with libraries, mainly for budget reasons, and one of my favorite tricks to come up with totally new sounds is just to layer them with totally unrelated sounds and make a completely unique sound. For example, if I have to create a fireball sound, I start assembling different sounds of single flames, whoosh sounds, and adding special effects such as fast echoing or flanker effects on just some frequency and so on. You can be very creative and the result can sound very natural, and only you will know how many details you add at the end.
That's true. How much do you actually rely on these external audio libraries or the audio library you have built for yourself versus how much do you go and record new stuff into the library or for a particular project? Like you mentioned something about the library, so...
Yeah, I often rely on libraries, mainly because it helps keeping the budget down and because they are often very high quality recordings, which is also helpful if you want to edit them into what you need. I personally do a lot of editing. It's very rare that I use sounds striked from the library, just like this. And I wish I had experimented more with just a field microphone, but I never gone that way. Never had the chance to spend so much time on doing that, actually.
Yeah, me too. I use libraries quite a lot, but sometimes, mainly like you mentioned with budget and also time, because it takes, for a while I like to do a lot of Foley, but it takes so much time editing after the recording session. So I had to stop doing that. Even though it was fun, it was just taking too much of the time that I wanted to do actual editing and sound design work. And right now, because I did that, I have a big library of my own sounds, but I also use other libraries, and like for certain sounds, it's easier to just go and quickly record it with like my Zoom or a mic I have right somewhere near me and just use that sound instead of going through a library, because sometimes it can take a lot of time to find what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I agree that libraries are super helpful, because sometimes the recordings are very long too, and you find that one like tiny spot where the perfect sound is, and then you didn't have to spend the time looking for something that made that sound.
Yeah, I'm thinking back on my own sound design stuff that I did back in the day, and part of it was I relied a lot on the libraries as well, especially free libraries that I was able to find online and things like that. But some sounds, it was just easier to take my cell phone, because I didn't have any equipment. I just had my phone and just walk to the hallway. I had to make a sound of like a wall sliding, a dog wall sliding, and of course it was hard to find a sound that was natural and sounded like a paw going against the wall. So in the end, my best way to do it was grab my phone, go into a hallway with a slightly rough wall, and then just slide along that one.
Yeah.
Much faster and much easier than trying to figure out from the library what I can use and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. It's for those super specific things that it's so much easier to just go and record it.
Yeah. However, speaking of the whole recording process, and what sort of, Oda, you mentioned some of the equipment you use. If somebody wants to start recording their own stuff, well, I mentioned I just used my phone. You had some proper equipment. Like, what should people look into for this whole recording their own sounds and Foley? And
I think that as long as you have something that you can record with, it's a very good start. Like you mentioned, you had your phone, and I mean, there's a microphone there and you can record things, so that's a very good start. But I think portable ones are very good to start out with, maybe because you can also usually hook up like external mics to them, but you can also just carry them with you around wherever you go. So if you hear a very cool sound when you're out walking somewhere, you can just like record it and you have it and it's good. But because if you buy a very big like basically make your own studio, then you can't carry that around with you. Obviously it's going to weigh way too much and take a lot of space. But a very small recorder is super, like, it's useful to have, I think. So that's where I would start.
All right.
Yeah, there are also a lot of very small ones that you can just connect to your phone, so you don't even have to have an actual recorder.
That's basically like a portable microphone that goes into your phone and done.
Yeah.
I think I've used those for some podcasts of mine.
Yeah, actually. It works really well.
Yeah. Speaking of new people who wants to get into this whole stuff, since you both are sound designers and composers, what? Okay, I'm just gonna use the question I phrased earlier on in my notes. What would be the best way to get into composing or sound designing video games for somebody who maybe has some experience or no experience at all but wants to get into the video games on the audio side? What would be your advice?
Well, game jams are very good places to meet people, I think, both online and just like at an actual location, just to get some experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And Oda mentioned people. My advice is that you not only should have skills, but also be good at connecting with people. It won't be easy. It requires great skills.
Yeah, especially the first time when you go there and you don't know anyone.
Yeah.
But it gets better.
gotta be able to jump in there and say, hey, I do noises.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, I would imagine that even if you aren't that skilled at it, if you go to a game jam and say, hey, I make sounds, you get taken pretty quickly to a team.
Yeah, if you have done a little bit of audio, then you know a lot more about audio than most of the people there anyways.
Yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, I've noticed that myself. It's like whenever something pops up audio related, usually I'm the guy being asked about it because nobody else even has any idea what the knobs or buttons or anything is for.
Yeah.
Does help that I have some music background myself.
Yeah. Well, another thing too, like if there are people who are students and there's a local university or something where they have a game development course, then getting in touch with those students are also a really good way to get going, because especially if they are graduating at the same time as you, because then you have contacts in the industry after you graduate yourself.
Yeah. And
I think it's worth mention also that you need a portfolio.
Yeah.
I talk with many amateurs, and they write to me, and are like, I'm a sound designer. I want to work with some developer, and then my question is always, okay, where can I listen to the stuff you make? And then they have nothing that just tracks uploaded in random websites. I mean, it should be important to actually build a portfolio on your own website and spread it to people that could be interested in that kind of music, of course.
Yeah, and if you do both sound design and music, then have two different show reels. Have one for sound design and one for music, because if they're both in the same place, it's more difficult for people to realize what you've done.
So, Brain, please work. I would imagine it's also said that if people are looking for a sound designer, it's just, okay, this is the sound design reel, and they can just focus on that.
Yeah.
Same thing, but different wording, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Also, another advice, don't harass developers with random music. If you really want to work with someone, try to get some background information about them, about their previous and future projects, their vision, and start with some nice chat. And that will eventually lead you to know more people and make them remember about you and your music when they need it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are cold emailing them, then it would be better probably to just not mention that you do sound or music, because that way, if you do that, it seems like you're looking for a job. But if you just say that you appreciate their work and you like what they're doing, that makes it more, well, you seem more approachable. And then maybe you introduce the fact that you are a sound and music designer after you have become a bit more close with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be friendly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Make friends.
One advice I'm gonna throw, because I've been at the other end, I've been at the end where people actually do cold mail and stuff like that. Actually make it look like you wrote to the people that you want to make music for. We had in the game I made the sounds for, we had a few people approach us for the music part. A couple of them were clearly copy-pasted. Oh, and another tip that goes into what Filippo, you were saying earlier about the portfolios and stuff like that. If you throw your stuff online and actually link to it, make sure the links work.
Oh yeah.
We had a few cases where there was guy had a lot of links in there, and a couple of them didn't work at all. So we couldn't really judge his output because the links didn't work, or some of the links didn't work.
Yeah. That's a very good point.
The worst way to advertise yourself.
Speaking of the portfolio, actually, the online portfolio, would you say at what point should you start throwing stuff onto the portfolio? The moment you start doing things, or should you wait for a while until you learn some stuff and then start building the portfolio? Basically, my question is, when should you start making that portfolio? If the basis is that you should have one, but when should you start making it?
I think as soon as you have anything that you can put together that shows a bit of variety. And then you can always just change it after a while. If you have more experience, you can remove and add new things.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. And also I would mention that sometimes with developers, artists, it works better if you also create mockups about not just music tracks, but if you tie them together with some visuals.
Yeah.
The people can actually see the music in action, and it works even better.
Yeah, especially with sound design.
Yeah.
If you just hear sound effects, there's no context. You don't know if this is stuff that actually fits anything.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's just. Oh, you were saying, Filippo. Were you saying something?
So don't stop to standard portfolios. Try to be creative with them too.
Yeah. Speaking of that whole, make sure that you have something to visualize with the sound. I don't know if you guys have been watching BlizzCon for the past couple of years. Probably not.
No.
There was this one. They had this one show, track or panel, or what do you call it, where they were talking about how they made sounds for StarCraft. And one of the cannon sounds or attacking sounds or something like this were actually started off as they put a microphone in front of a microwave and just recorded that hum of the microwave and then just added a few things to it. So I don't remember what all the other sounds are, a little bit of editing here and there, and then put the full thing in front of the whole situation where it happened. Basically a big ass cannon firing off. And you don't even notice that it's a microwave at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I was saying before, you will never know what are you actually listening to.
Yeah. Like rain is very often just bacon being fried in a pan.
Yeah, I've heard about that one actually.
Yeah. It's quite common, I think.
It's one of those easy examples to showcase that not everything is true.
Yes, absolutely.
Moving to a little different question actually, but still staying in this whole own library thing here. But going into the music side of it. Well, you both are composers and you both do your own music. But is there a situation where you would focus on using or go for a licensed song? Like instead of making a song yourself to the particular situation or a moment in a game, you would go for a licensed song. Is there any situation like that, and why?
I think if there was a very tight budget or a deadline that would make it impossible to make anything, that would probably be the only situation. Because I try to not do too much, because obviously I don't want to be stressed out about work. I want it to be fun. So I think that's the only... If it's actually impossible to get it done in a different way, then I think that's the situation where it would be a solution.
Yeah, for me too. It's something very related to the budget. I honestly, it never happened to me to use licensed songs.
Same.
I guess it could be the creative director who decides to go for a licensed song or something like that, but
Yeah.
Yeah, but personally, I would prefer making it and have it actually be made for the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why.
Mm.
It. I'm forgetting the phrasing I had in my head. It's like when you create something, but you add something pre-made to it. It doesn't feel as good or as original as making it all from scratch, so to speak.
Yeah, and especially if all the other tracks are actually made for the purpose of the game, then maybe that external track wouldn't fit as well in with the rest of the game.
That would be a nightmare.
Yeah, that would be difficult to make it work, I think.
Yeah, that is true. Have you guys heard or seen in a game a situation where they used licensed songs and their own songs and it worked really well? Have you seen anything that actually made it work, in your opinion?
I can't think of anything right now, actually. I think it's mostly common that what I've seen is mostly at game jams, and then it's not actually something that people continue working on afterwards usually.
Yeah, so something that you just need to throw together quickly.
Yeah, I think so.
All right.
I think that since many indie developers are buying music from my website, so it's considered licensed songs because I didn't make that music for their game.
Mm-hmm.
But they, for example, ask for other original music to couple together. That is the only case I could say it worked, because it was always me.
Yeah.
And the music.
So you're still working with something you've made, so it's easier to make it work together, I guess.
Yeah.
Exactly. But even in that case, I had to put my hands on the music they licensed.
Yeah.
Because I want it to be perfect.
Yeah. So you kind of edited it afterwards.
Yeah, because maybe they purchased a license of a 5 years old track, and of course today it sounds a bit different than what I can do today.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've evolved in your craft.
What?
You've evolved in your craft, so to speak. Yeah. I had a... since we went on the topic of the developers buying a sample or a licensed track, and then you jump in and help craft more tracks to them. I had this question regarding this whole thing. Like, what is the process for creating the auditory elements in a game? And how can the rest of the dev team assist in it? Like, you both are freelancers, but you have had experiences with different dev teams about how they do the stuff, how you throw your input in, how you throw your work in there. Like, how does that process usually go, and how can the dev team help you with this? Or make it easier for you?
Do you want to start?
Well, clearly the team can really help, but it never happened that I had clear instructions about it. They usually just tell me, "Hey, dude, make sound for this."
Yeah.
So, yeah, usually you of course start first doing some mock-ups, some temporary audio for the game, so they can have their own idea of what they need, what they like, and what they can ask to you. So usually I think the first step of the process for creating audio for a game is having some references. I use them a lot, and we usually have a discussion about what could sound right for the game, and then start working on that initial direction.
Yeah. I think it's a good thing to talk about where they found their initial inspiration from, because often if they have a visual inspiration or something like that, it's often a good idea to take some inspiration from that source when you do the sound design too, because the reason they like that source or the universe that they chose for inspiration is the whole thing, most likely, not just the visuals. So I think that's a good thing. And in some cases, for certain sounds that are very important, like the voice that I'm doing for one of the games, then I'm making versions and I send it to them and they give me feedback on it. And then I just send them new versions until we find something that we all like. Because sometimes that's the case. But with most of the sounds and the games I'm working on, it's like, we don't know, just do your thing.
All right. But I'm also...
or they could simply describe their vision to you, and that just really ignites your creativity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make you start thinking about ideas, concepts, and you are the one looking for references, not them, but you, based on your own experience. Games you played in the past and something like that.
Yeah. Something that I'm also thinking on this whole, how can the rest of the dev team assist you with the process of creating the auditory elements? I'm also thinking on the whole adding them to the game part. Like, usually it's not the sound designer or the composer. Sometimes the composer might be just make the track and throw it to the devs and hey, we're good. But usually the sound designer have to do something in the game itself as well. How can the dev team help with this part? Like, make it as easy as possible for the sound people to do their stuff, do their job.
I think the only case where I had to implement my own sound effects was for Hill Climb Racing 2. Basically, they explained me how their audio engine worked, and so I basically was the one that edited the files, actually the numbers, the parameters of the sound, because they rely a lot on the car engine sound, so it requires sound effects, but also to tweak parameters and that kind of stuff. Of course, that was very easy to do. I had no difficulties, but of course, I think the help from the developers is very important.
Yeah, I usually use middleware, Fmod or Wise, to implement my sounds, but it's important to have someone on the team that helps you implement them into the game in the code, because I know a little bit of code, but not very much, so I wouldn't want to touch any of it in case I ruin anything. So I think if you're using middleware, then having one person that, in particular, that you work closely with to implement the sounds is very important.
Would you say it's important for a sound designer to actually know how to use middleware? F-mode advice, stuff like this?
It's helpful, I think, because a lot of games use it, but it's not 100% necessary. But I think it would open a lot of doors, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially because many people nowadays use tools like Unity for creating games. So the more you know the tools, the better chance you have to work with more developers.
Yes. And it gives you way more control over how your sounds actually sound, because even if the sound effect itself sounds good when you play it back, it doesn't necessarily have to sound good in the game, because maybe it clashes with the rest of the audio mix. Maybe you need to do some ducking and stuff to make things actually sound good. And also, if you know middleware, you can, as you mentioned, with parameters, you can make a lot of variations depending on what's going on in the game. So, yeah, it makes it the whole audio side of the game way more, I guess, adaptive and feel more natural.
Yeah. Maybe I should have used middleware back in the day when I was doing the sound design thing.
It's a lot of fun.
I was a second designer in a team, and our lead designer had tried to do some F-mode stuff back in the day, and he had just hated it. He was like, I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole, and because I had an audio background, he was like, Eirik, do this. Just dumped it off to me. I was like, oh great, I'm gonna do the audio stuff. And then the team decided that they're just gonna build their own audio engine in the Unity and stuff like that. And most of the whole thing was just fine-tuning the volumes so that I didn't have the clashes, as you said, or the correct thing popped out when I needed them pop out and things like that.
Yeah, well, it depends a lot of what the game needs too.
Yeah, that is true as well. Okay, actually, we have an audience question about this middlewares. Like, which one do you guys use, Fmod or Revise, and how often or how much do you use them?
I mostly use Fmod, but it's because it's a cheaper pricing model for the developers than Wise. Also, I think Fmod is easier to get into if you already know a DAW, because it looks more like a DAW than Wise does. What was the last part of the question?
How often or how much?
Every day. Every single day. And some days I don't even open my DAW, I just tweak things in Fmod all day.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you, Filippo, didn't even use the middleware.
It never happened to me to get the hands on any of them. I mean, Hill Climb Racing is using a custom engine. I think it's based on Fmod, but I basically am editing files, so I didn't put my hands on Fmod.
Yeah. There was another question here that was similar to what we did spoke about earlier on. How often do you just make the audio material and the company implements it for you, or implements the audio material for you? Like you, Filippo, mentioned something that usually that's what you do, is that you make the audio stuff and then give it onwards and the company implements it. Or did I misunderstand you?
No, that's what happened. Basically, always. I usually send all the music, the sounds, voiceover, and then the developer implements it in their own game.
So, your experience, Oda, is that you usually just do it with Fmod and for them, or?
Yeah, well, it's especially for sound design. When it comes to music, it's a bit more common that you make the music and just send it off, because it's often not as important that you have the right parameters and like trigger behaviors and stuff like that with the music, because it's not as complex to play back as the sound design. But it depends on the size of the game, really. If it's a very small game, then the developers usually are fine doing it on their own. But if it's several hours, then it's a lot to think about. So I think it's more common for bigger projects that you do it yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. I was just thinking, we've been going on for almost 50 minutes, and we started sliding a little bit into the Q&A section accidentally here. I'm gonna leave one question to the very end, which I think might give some fun answers, fun thoughts. But there's one question that both the audience raised and that I have written up here.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out which one is worded better. Okay, these are actually a little different. Okay, I'm gonna go with the audience one. What should indie composers and audio designers do in order to stand out?
In what way? Do you mean when you're trying to get work, or when you're already working and standing out of like as a composer?
I think it's the former.
Okay. For me, it's worked pretty well to, I guess I mentioned earlier, just get in touch with them in a friendly manner. And then after a while, maybe you've made, like, for a project that I just started working on, I made a short demo of music that I thought really fit the game, and I sent them that. And they were not expecting to get anything like that at all. And they really appreciated it and ended up hiring me. So, and I've heard that happen to other people too. So I think that just taking initiative and doing stuff like that will make you stand out, instead of just standing off your reel, because maybe the music you have on your show reel doesn't really work with the game. Even if it's amazing music, if it doesn't work with the game, then it doesn't matter to the devs, because they don't know if you can actually make something that they want to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another thing I think it is working very good for indie musicians is when they use popular brands or IPs and do their own covers of famous music themes. And they actually, if their music is good, the fact that they are covering a very popular game usually gives the people the idea that you can do that kind of stuff. You can do music that sounds like Zelda, and so you are great. I want to work with you, basically. Yeah. I lost a job because the choice was between me and another guy that had a YouTube channel, very popular, and he basically creates piano covers about famous games. So I thought that is very important. That could be something to think of.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, what I would like to add to basically both of your advice is that whenever you make the music, make it sound like yourself. It's like everybody has their own signature sound or feel to the music. Make sure that it actually is conveyed when you create the music and the sounds and things like that. The project I was working on as a sound designer, the people who send stuff in, there was a few that sounded generic, to put it straight up. And it was like, I was listening to it and I was like, this is something that I could find on any licensed site or something like that. It didn't sound like the composer. It sounded something that anybody could make. And having that own signature sound then made it easier for us to pick between all the composers that we wanted to. And it actually reminded me of how we found the composer that, Oda, your point, it reminded me of how we found the guy who we ended up getting this stuff for. He had this show reel on SoundCloud, all the music and songs. We went and listened to it, and we found something that was similar to what we wanted. Not exactly, but similar. And then we asked him to create a sound. Because of that made an impression on us, we asked him to create something for based on a picture, the promotional picture we had. Like, what would this sound to you? Because we didn't have anything video or anything official out at that point.
Yeah.
And he made it. He made a soundtrack, and it fit perfectly. So, asking him to create it gave us the perfect sound that we were looking for. And being proactive, like you said, actually is sound advice. Yeah.
Yeah, that I want to add something to this. Very often, indie developers like to share footage about their game while they are developing it, or also GIFs, animated GIFs. And I usually use that kind of those footage to actually make some music and sound for them, just for fun. And they usually appreciate that when you send it to them. So it is something worth trying.
Yeah.
So you actually have a chance to actually create an exact music mood for them, instead of just sending them your portfolio.
Yeah, that's what I did with the one where I made something specific for like what I thought would fit to. I made the music by watching videos of gameplay, and then when I sent it as a video with the music on top of the actual game capture, not just the track, because that way they could see if it actually fit or not.
Yeah, that's super effective.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I really liked that approach to it. Okay, my brain just decided to blank out completely. But yeah, it's like, well, yeah, when you have just the sound itself or the music itself, it, at least what I've noticed when I listen to tracks or listen to people send their tracks in, try to make sure of how it functions and how would it fit in there. It's always a little hard, but when you add the video in the background, it makes it a lot easier to figure it out. And one of the ways we actually found out that the guy was perfect fit for that game is that I just put the soundtrack on, or the song on, running on VLC on loop, and then I just started playing the game, and I was like, this suits perfectly. This is the perfect fit. As, of course, in our case, he couldn't have sent a video material on top of it, but hey, if it's possible, then that's perfect advice, because that's how the game developers know how it works.
Yeah, can make the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the topic of this, of somebody trying to get in the business and stand out and stuff like that, if there's somebody watching this now or later on and who would like to make a living as a composer or sound designer in games or both, what advice would you give him? Like, how would you condense the advice to them?
Well, that's a bit... How do you make that short?
Feel free to go in depth as well. I don't mind.
Yeah, well, meet people, work on your craft every day, even if you don't have to do it for 8 hours. if you do it for 10 minutes a day, that's way better than a lot of people do, because a lot of people would get super eager and do it for several hours a day for maybe a week and they get tired of it. But if you do it for small amounts of time, a lot of days in a row, then you'll eventually get better, so you don't have to exhaust yourself doing it. And then eventually, especially if you have a full-time job and you do audio as a side thing to begin with, then I think it's better to make it sustainable. Don't burn yourself out before you get started.
Yeah,
I agree. Keep practicing with doing music. Always finish your projects.
Yes. Yes.
Do a lot of networking offline at game conferences or game jams, and online on social networks.
Yeah, you should. I think it's a better idea to spend money going to conferences and meetups than it is to buy gear, to be honest, because you can always upgrade your gear later on. But if you don't meet people, then you won't get the gigs to pay for your new gear. And if you know how to use, even if you have a DAW and only the plugins and stuff that come with it and nothing from other sources, if you know what you're doing, you can make something good with what you got.
Yeah, definitely. Another advice could be to be reachable. I mean, try to make it simple and easy for people to reach you and your music.
Yeah. And have a professional looking email.
Yeah.
Couple of small additions I want to throw in that fits with what you have said. One of them regarding that whole gear and DAW and stuff like that. You don't even need any high-tech DAW, as you said, Oda. It's hell, I started with Audacity. And I was happy with it. Yeah, it works just fine. I didn't move to Reaper until a friend of mine was like, hey, have you actually looked into this? No. And then I looked into it, it worked much better, so then I moved over. But I was perfectly fine doing all the shit in Audacity.
Yeah.
Second one, if you end up doing for long periods of time, actually do have breaks. Audio fatigue is a thing.
Yeah. It feels like I have cotton in my ears if I've been doing music, mixing or something for an entire day. It takes more than one day to get rid of it. So breaks are very important.
Yeah, I think personally, for me, it's like 2 hours non-stop sound stuff, roughly. Depends if I'm trying to sort through an audio library or if I'm editing a particular sound or something like that. About 2 hours without breaks, and the rest of the day I'm useless as a sound guy. I can't. The sounds just don't come out correctly.
Yeah, for me it's different with sound design and with music, especially if I'm mixing. Or just continuously listening to music. That makes me tired way more quickly than if I'm editing sound effects, because they're shorter, so it doesn't affect my eardrums in the same way because it's not continuously moving them around.
Yeah.
Unless you put them on loop.
Yeah. Then you start hearing weird frequencies after a while.
Yeah, the thing is, I usually go with the whole put stuff on loop and start editing from there.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. And then you remove all the annoying frequencies, and when you get back from break, you hear that you just killed the sound.
Yeah, but sometimes you just have to go on with the whole loop thingy just to pinpoint. One project I was doing audio on was like a video file just recently. And there was this one section of that video file. We're talking 2 or 3 seconds that I had to do some editing on because there was a really high-pitched S sound, a real harsh S. And I just had to start working with that, start fixing and adjusting and that stuff. and I just had to put that sound on loop.
Oh, it's horrible.
It took
Yeah.
like 5 minutes for me to fix that particular sound, and after the 5 minutes, I was like, "Yep, I'm done. I can't hear differences anymore."
I know. Or you think you fixed it and then you get back and everything is worse than it was when you started.
Yeah, that's when
That
I pulled the
happens sometimes.
other guy and like, "Hey, come give me your opinion. Does this sound good to you?"
Yeah.
Especially when you have tight deadlines.
Yeah.
You don't have physically the time to judge your own work.
Yeah.
It can be helpful to send your stuff to another sound guy just for,
Peer
receiving
review.
something. Am I doing everything wrong?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm in the trouble.
Yeah, well, just watching people playtest the game, even if you're not listening to what they're hearing, you can even see their reactions too, and that helps a lot to judge whether or not you have made the right sound design choices as well. Because sometimes a single sound might be the only clue people have on what they're supposed to be doing, and if the sound you made didn't convey that, it's gonna be pretty obvious if you see someone play the game.
Yeah. Well, I just had a completely different thought and question pop into my mind regarding that, but I think it's good. It's a good one to ask. From the sounds of it, Oda, it sounds like you talk about console and PC games in particular, where people actually have a headset on and sound on and stuff like that. And this one goes for both of you, especially Filippo, since you have experience doing it on mobile. How would you do this stuff on mobile where people actually don't have their sounds on all the time, or people would play without sounds on? If you if you were told, okay, this particular thing requires, or you need to do sound design for a mobile game in general, let's put it that way. Like, how would you start approaching something like that?
Well, it never happened to me to work on a mobile game that rely on sound effects so much. The only thing I try to take care of is that the music should work well with the phone speakers and, of course, with the earphones too, because it's very likely that the user will play with their headphones. Apart of that, there is nothing else that I could add.
How do you actually make sure that it works well on the phone speakers? Is it something that you take, like, of course, listening to it while you do it and testing it out through your phone speakers is a thing, but is there something that you do before you start checking it out on the phone while you're composing it or something? Is there some certain sounds or frequencies that you focus on or stuff like that?
Yes, there are some tools that can simulate the different kind of speakers, such as smartphones or small speakers, large speakers. And other than that, I usually take care of the stereo field. I ensure that everything is mono compatible because many smartphones have just one speaker, and that's it.
You want to add something to this, Oda, or?
I think that covers it pretty well.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Since I don't see too many more questions from the audience, I'm gonna throw a fun one for you before we start wrapping this one up. Just let me dig it out. There we go. You might remember this one from the set of questions I threw at you earlier on. What is the oddest limitation you've had in a project, and how did it shape the end result of it? Have you had anything like this happen, and how did it end up shaping the whole thing in the end?
For me, it's definitely the project where I'm using AI. It's been very interesting to start working on that because I'd never done it before. But I can't. Other than that, it's mostly more common restrictions like you can't have more than 3 layers of music playing because we don't have enough room for more than that and stuff like. Well, limitations like those.
Yeah. How has the AI it changed the end result for you then?
Yeah, well, it's still in progress, but it definitely changes my workflow. And when your workflow is changed, then a lot of new things can happen. So, for example, I have the opportunity to go in and choose like chord progressions and instrumentation stuff in the software that I'm using. And that shapes the music in a very interesting way. And I can also choose whether a section is going from like very soft to very loud and stuff like that. So you can get a lot of movements already before you start actually tweaking and working with the MIDI. And that's been very interesting. A lot of things that the AI generates are things I would never have thought of doing because it doesn't sound human.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you about that AI later on off stream, but
Yeah.
have you had anything like this, Filippo?
The only limitation I could think of is that if you are a mobile game composer, the most usual limitation is the size of the audio assets. You are forced to optimize everything, and very often the music is sacrificed, so you have to write very short pieces of music. Sometimes you have to pack together sounds and music, especially if you have some ambient sounds like birds or wind. That happened to me, that I had to make everything in just one file. And then the compression can ruin a lot of the quality of the audio you made.
Yeah.
That could be pretty limiting.
Okay, but no weird limitations or anything.
What?
No weird limitations for you.
Oh, weird, I wouldn't say.
Okay.
Just challenging.
Yeah.
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 Normal day at the office, in other words. But hey, I think we've been going at it for over an hour, and there's been some questions thrown at us. But I think we should start wrapping this up. So that's what we are gonna be doing. Thank you both for coming onto the panel and chatting with me about this game audio. I hope for the audience this has been useful and there's been a good information, at least for me there was. I really enjoyed this chat we had. Stay tuned for next DevsTalk, which will be announced soon, and we'll see what happens then. So yeah. Thank you both, and
Thanks for having me.
You.
And thank you, audience, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Ciao.
Ha det.
Whew. There we go. That was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed
Yeah.
that.
Totally.
Yeah.